Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah Robinson. I'm art director and visual editor at the Future Laboratory. And we are a futures consultancy based in London. And to give you a bit of an idea, over the past kind of 6 or 7 years, my role has really been to translate how shifts in consumer thinking are set to impact on the visual and the design landscape. So how are shifts within kind of socioeconomic change, the environment, and technology set to impact on the design of retail spaces, products, and services? So I wanted to start off with a quote here. You cannot rely on your legacy alone. You can no longer expect people to flock to you just because you're Barney's New York or Bergdorf Goodman. And that's a quote by Tiffany Yanetta, who's shopping director at Rack.com. And what I really wanted to unpack with this quote is the fact that few sectors are changing as quickly and as profoundly as the retail sector. And importantly, customers' and consumers' expectations are changing just as quickly. So whereas previously we saw retailers be able to kind of rest on their heritage and what they'd done in the past, now consumers expect much, much more. So they expect cross-channel service, they expect exceptional products, and most importantly, a really key point is that as consumers, we now align our moral values with our shopping behaviors and our spending habits. So consumers, more than ever, need to know a brand's value and equally feel like their own values are aligned with this. So in 2018 and the upcoming years, we believe an equilibrium will be reached between the relationship between consumers and retailers. So for businesses, as I'm sure many of you are aware, it's no longer just about solving consumers' complaints, but it's really actually about preempting their concerns and increasingly using technology to do this. And if we think about the kind of broader sociocultural sphere, many of us as consumers and customers and citizens, we're losing trust in traditional institutions, losing trust in governments, in education systems. So is this potentially an opportunity for brands and retailers to step in? So I'm going to be taking you through some of the shifts and emerging trends that we're seeing begin to evolve across the retail industry. And these are driven mainly by technology, transparency, and experience. And I think it's also really interesting to think about this term, experience. Is it becoming a bit of a buzzword? Every brand is told they have to do an experience, create a memorable experience. But what does it mean? What does experience mean in the future? And is the experience economy changing to a transformation economy? And what does that mean for brands? So the way that we work at the Future Laboratory is very much looking at cross-sectors and how one industry impacts on another. So you'll see that some of the examples that I'm going to go through are from various different industries, but equally translate into fashion and retail industry in the future. So first up, I want to kind of think about how brands are starting to focus on the whole ecosystem that their product interacts within. So it's absolutely no longer okay to just create a product and sell it to a consumer and not think about the material that it's made from or the end life point of that product. And importantly, brands are now starting to think about how consumers should care for products and look after them in the future. So I've got a stat here. According to McKinsey, the number of garments purchased by the average consumer increased by 60% from the year 2000 to the year 2014. And as consumers, we tend to keep our garments for half as long as we did 15 years ago. So that's quite a big statistic that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So we're seeing brands and business kind of take a stand in this. We can see here that laundry accounts for 1/4 of the carbon footprint of clothing, which is quite an unbelievable figure. So we're seeing brands such as Stella McCartney create initiatives such as the Clever Care initiative to really take a step to educate and empower her customers. So I'm going to show you a short excerpt now from one of the films she created on the microsite.
Hello. Most people don't know this, but wool actually has self-cleaning properties. Leave wool out in a light breeze, and in no time at all, it will be as good as new. And don't forget, wool is both warm and breathable.
Yeah, that did the trick.
So what we found interesting about this is obviously it's aimed at kind of, quite a young consumer group, but the tone of voice and the language is quite playful. Stella McCartney's tackling quite a big subject here around, the environment, sustainability, but she's doing it in a very light-hearted way that isn't inducing guilt. And it's really making consumers feel like they can be involved and not intimidated. So 70% of us inherit our laundry habits from our parents and are actually unaware of more sustainable alternatives. So we're seeing brands and businesses become a lot more upstream in when they're designing their clothing. So a really exciting project launched by Not Just a Label and appliance manufacturer AEG is called the Care Label Project. And what they decided to do was launch a modern care label for people's clothes to give them much more information around how to wash at lower temperatures. And this has actually been integrated into over 18,200 garments already. And we can see here a quote from Steven Seagal, who's the founder of Not Just a Label. He said, "By directly engaging with tomorrow's consumers, we can guide them towards incorporating fabric care in the design process." So this is really about the point of brands being very upstream in their thinking and really taking responsibility for how consumers are going to care for their goods. Because if now we want a long-term sustainable relationship with our clothing, brands need to start empowering consumers to know how to do that. So moving on to start to think about the physical space, we're all very aware here that you can no longer distinguish the online customer and the customer that shops in the physical retail space. We know that as consumers, we like the kind of seamless, easy nature of clicking and shopping online, but we also like the bricks and mortar store experience. And consumers are still very loyal to physical stores, but they're demanding enhanced experience when they're in the store. They're used to having this ease and this simplicity online, and they now expect this in retail environments as well. So quite an interesting example is Fabled by Marie Claire magazine. So they created a space in London which mirrored their online editorial platform. So you can go into the store, you can click on a screen and look at the editor's picks, and you can buy the same products that are available on the website. Gregor Jackson, who's from the design studio behind Fabled, said, "The consumer is browsing online, so bringing some digital content into the store makes instant brand connection." So this is a short excerpt of an interview that my team created with the founders.
Fabled is a new brand that has been launched in partnership with Marie Claire into the beauty and wellbeing space. It's predominantly an online retail model that's supported by a fantastic experiential flagship on Tottenham Court Road. The aim really was to try and break the mould of the traditional beauty retailing model in terms of a shop within the UK. It's very dominated by department stores and a certain well-known chemist, and very brand driven. And we wanted to create a standalone beauty boutique that was very experiential, lots of test and play, and digitally integrated.
So, of course, we're also seeing many brands that previously only existed in the online space move into the physical space as a way to create much deeper connections with their consumers. So Everlane, I'm sure you're all familiar with the kind of radical transparency brand, previously only existed online. They created their first physical space, which was a fit studio. And when you came into the space, you were given the option to give over your payment details. Then you're then allowed to browse quite freely around the store. At the end, when you want to make a payment, they managed to reduce the payment time to only 30 seconds, so giving you that very frictionless feel within the physical space. Amazon, of course, created their grocery store, Go, where you could just walk around the store and things are automatically added to your basket, and then at the end you pay through your Amazon account. We're also seeing this happen across the world in other places, so a really interesting example to look up is Au Point Rouge, which is a Russian department store. And they actually treated their department store like an exhibition space. So people can go around and shop through an app and have a virtual basket on their phone, which they're adding items to, and then at the end, collect their items before they leave, so they don't have to carry things around the store. So again, creating this quite ease of payments and allowing people to explore a space a lot more freely. So of course, when we're thinking about placemaking and we're thinking about the physicality of retail spaces, we can't ignore traditional department stores. So, traditionally department stores have really been a flagship space for brands where they could show off the best of their offering. We can't deny that department stores are starting to struggle. In the US, department stores' sales have fallen consistently in the past 10 years. So they're struggling, but there's a huge amount of innovation also happening within department stores. So one example here we can see is Saks Fifth Avenue, which opened a new downtown location. And this was really to start connecting with a younger demographic. So at this space, it has a smaller footprint, and it changes designers every 30 days. So they really wanted to start evoking the feel of a concept store and a boutique. And we have another quote from Tiffany Yonetta, who says, "Going to the main flagship stores is such a production. Too many floors, too many nooks. It's not very intimate anymore." And this is really the aim of creating these intimate connections with consumers. So we're also seeing some really exciting collaborations take place. So Hermes partnered with Nordstrom to create this temporary space, which was actually the first time that they allowed their scarves to be shown not behind glass cases. So they were hung up almost as if they were kind of exotic rugs. Customers could touch and feel and really experiment with the scarves. And they also allowed a slightly lower entry point to the brand Hermes. So we're actually very successful in gaining a younger demographic of consumers. Another really, really exciting innovation is, of course, Rent the Runway, which has recently launched in a number of stores. So Rent the Runway, we know is very much a millennial brand. Millennials now want access over ownership, and that's showing no sign of changing. However, they partnered with Neiman Marcus. The average age of Neiman Marcus consumer is 51 years old. So this is kind of interesting when you think about this, younger kind of Rent the Runway space moving into Neiman Marcus. And of course, this was hugely successful. Rent the Runway are now in 5 stores across the US because they're really blending that experience for different demographics and allowing you to be in the space, try on garments, interact with different concierge services, and really being quite successful around that to tapping into a younger demographic. So we also kind of need to think about these different digital layers and digital experiences that are being used in-store. And when we think about the traditional idea of the loyalty program or the loyalty card, this is really being reimagined and rearticulated to connect with a younger generation of shoppers. So we're seeing brands kind of create limited edition products, services, but really importantly, connect through consumers with the channels that they are operating on. So this is an example called Wa Nails, which is a nail studio in London. And they're very interesting because of two reasons. They're very tech and digitally enabled in terms of their space, so you can try on different things in virtual reality, and it has all of that kind of digital layering. But also what they do quite well is that they actually allow customers to book appointments through WhatsApp. So they looked at their target demographic and they thought, okay, it's teenagers. They're constantly online, they're sending texts, they're on WhatsApp, so we're going to communicate to them through that channel, which is creating this feeling of VIP and invitation only through the channels that they're interacting with their consumers through. Everlane, again, created an interesting project. So they launched a 9-piece collection, which is only available to their kind of top customers, and it's called Invite Only. Everyone can browse it on the website, but you cannot access it. Everlane also created an interesting feature in their Instagram. So they created a private Instagram, which you had to try and become part of, and that basically acted as a research and development platform. So Everlane customers were able to interact with designers and talk about new products that they were thinking about putting into manufacture. So again, a kind of really interesting way of connecting with consumers through different channels. Another interesting example is Adidas. So Adidas kind of used this idea of dark social and the dark web and kind of hidden influencers. So they basically created a glitch trainer feature where you could only access this new customization through interacting on Instagram or Twitter, and then you're given a unique code which allows you to be able to customize your trainers. So, thinking about how these new layers of service are being integrated into different channels is really exciting. And I think a really important thing to note is if you're thinking about your brand's tone of voice, how does your brand identity translate to, text messages, to chatbots, to AI voice interfaces versus your service assistant in store? Because, as we heard earlier, now as consumers, we expect the same experience, the same tone of voice, and the same brand identity through all these different streams. So, of course, another really, really key shift that digital is facilitating is this idea of next-level transparency. So now, transparency is becoming so valued by consumers that it's becoming one of the highest things that they're looking for from retailers. So I have a couple of stats here. 3/4 of customers are willing to pay more for a product that promises total transparency. And just 12% of US consumers rank brands as their most trusted resource of information when they look at a product. So, we have to think, if all of these consumers are looking for the ingredients, looking for the information behind products, why are we hiding them at the back of products in the packaging? Why aren't we putting it at the forefront and making it a lot easier for consumers to really explore this? So some really interesting examples we've seen of brands taking on this approach to kind of extreme transparency. One is a multivitamin brand called Ritual. So they're an American-based brand. I'd really kind of urge people to have a look at their website. It's really interesting. They basically track every single product, every single ingredient that's within their vitamins, and it's also open source on their website. So you can add in your own information around the different ingredients that you found. You can attach different statistical surveys and new research around them as well. So it's very much creating an open dialogue with customers and really giving them the tools to start to understand what's behind their products themselves. And they also kind of tell you what's in the product and what is not and why. So importantly, giving that underlying level of education as well. Within fashion, we're also kind of seeing this extreme transparency emerge. So I'm sure some of you have seen the app which Kering recently launched. So they launched it with Parsons School of Design. It's called My EP&L, My Environmental Profit and Loss. So this is actually a tool for designers, as they're creating garments, to be 100% transparent about exactly the environmental and social impact that their garment is going to have when it gets into the world. So again, taking this upstream approach and transparency for even the designers right at the start of the product design process. We're also seeing some kind of really big collaborations around this area as well. So the Food and Future Collab is a project between Target, IDEO, and MIT Media Lab. And this was kind of an incubator project which happened in Target stores in America. And they really wanted to challenge how transparent a retailer and a food retailer in specific can be. So one of their kind of ideas was around putting ingredients right on the front of packaging and really challenging how technology can facilitate deeper learning and deeper levels of transparency.
What if we understood which food was good and which was not? What if we could navigate the land of diets and food fads and were never confused about where food grew, nor its effect on me and you? What if we came together to create a future where we can all understand and put the power back into our hands? Welcome to the Food Future Collab.
So obviously this is very food sector specific, but absolutely learnings that translate across sectors. Whereas the food industry has kind of been the first to make this shift. You know, I think there's a lot to learn from the way that these kind of food retailers are approaching transparency. So the final kind of trend that I want to look at is really focusing on long-term thinking. And this is kind of a thread that runs throughout all of these themes. There's a huge shift that needs to happen, and that is happening, from short-termism to long-term planning. So of course, you know, many kind of brands and retailers are aware of the importance of their workforce and having a highly educated workforce in the future. But at the moment, we're seeing this skills gap emerge, specifically within digital and the rise of e-commerce. So whereas brands are accelerating very quickly and need new workers to fill these new kind of roles around digital, there's actually a skills gap. So there's not enough workers to fill these roles. So there's kind of some really interesting innovation happening from brands and retailers here. So one example is Sir James Dyson. So he did a bit of research, and he found out that in the next 10 years' time, he was going to need 10 times as many engineers to run his business because of the rapid development of technology. And obviously, there's a huge issue because those engineers weren't there. So he's created his own academy to educate and train his workforce himself. That's going to be happening over the next 5 years. And this is not just happening in the UK. So we're seeing this happening a lot across the fashion industry. Of course, YOOX Net-a-Porter introduced a master's program recently with Bologna Business School. And Apple have also partnered with Turin Business School to create programs for designers to design in iOS and really take a very upstream approach to their workforce. Of course, we're also seeing Central St. Martin's, who have launched a partnership with LVMH, a sustainability program. And, you know, we can't really underline the point of this enough. Jeremy Till from the University of the Arts told us that this exceptional commitment by LVMH will enable us to co-design a world-leading program for the talent of tomorrow. So this is happening across sectors. I think a really interesting example of brands taking on this educational role is Mini. So Mini have launched a space, ADO, in Brooklyn. I'm not sure if anyone's had a chance to go yet. But it's basically a brand embassy. So you can go there. You can't buy any of Mini's products, but you get a very clear idea of what Mini's values are as a brand, and a really new way to connect with the brand as well. They have a design academy, and many people can go there to form new connections if you're in the design industry, and basically just evolve the Mini ethos. So this kind of leads me to think about a new term. Many experts at the moment, of course, have been talking about the shift from the experience economy to the transformation economy. And education is a big element of this. If we think about brands and institutions that traditionally have helped consumers have personal transformation, of course, that is the sports industry and healthcare. But this is a big opportunity for brands and retailers here to really show their civic values and show that they kind of care about the well-being and personal fulfillment of their consumers, but as well as their workforce in the future. So I just want to give you a really quick toolkit and some takeouts from the different trends that I just ran through. So firstly, help consumers to be more conscious. Develop creative campaigns and initiatives that educate consumers about the benefits of prolonging the life cycle of their clothing. So empower consumers. We know that the younger generation are born activists. They want to create change. So how, as a retailer, can you help them along this journey and help them do this? Streamline the shopping experience. Invest in technologies such as self-checkout that mimic the ease and autonomy of online shopping. So remembering this idea that now, as consumers, we don't see a difference between shopping online, shopping in the store. We want the same experience of a brand. And how can a more frictionless experience be created? Go to extreme lengths to regain consumer trust. Offer tools that enable consumers to verify a product's authenticity for their peace of mind. So going back to that idea of transparency and thinking about how, as a brand or as a retailer, you can really step in here and give consumers that peace of mind and knowledge and information. Focus on intimacy. Younger consumers are no longer willing to make the pilgrimage to flagship stores that overwhelm with their labyrinth format. So thinking about those department stores that are innovating and creating new experiences. Be channel agnostic. Consumers increasingly expect customer service to be seamless across their online and real-life experiences. I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about this today, but what is your tone of voice if you're a chatbot versus a on the phone or in-store experience? How does your brand DNA translate across? And finally, be a brand educator. And this goes back to many of the different trends that I ran through. So businesses now bear as much responsibility as governments for driving social change. So how can you really ingrain your civic values in your brand and really show this to your consumers? Thank you very much.